How's everyone doing? Good. I'm also doing good. I'm a little bit nervous, but we'll see how this goes. So as you already know, as Sarah mentioned, the theme of this year's gathering is the edge of change. And, you know, in the world that we live and the communities that we live and work, you know, we're often feeling this edge in our work. And it kind of feels like sometimes we're reaching a tipping point between this edge of things maybe that we know and the things we don't know, and certainty and uncertainty. And we can feel that for all of the reasons that she already pointed out, and then so many others. And the bright side is that usually it's at these places where we face adversity, where we see powerful and transformative actions come out, where we see people come together to make our world a better place. And so, rather than running away from that discomfort that we can sometimes feel when we're facing that edge, we can see it as an opportunity and a space to learn and grow together, and to be creative and collaborative. And our three panelists this morning, with whom I have the pleasure and honor to share the stage, truly understand what it means to work through this uncertainty with passion and determination that they need to move towards stronger and more sustainable and equitable communities. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists, who will begin with their own reflections on this year's theme. The order of introduction is not necessarily the order that they will speak. I think they're going to maybe do like rock, paper, scissors. I don't know, something to figure that out. But I'll introduce first Alderman Louise Campbell. She's an elder in residence at Red River College and the University of Manitoba, as well as sitting on numerous, and I mean a lot, of advisory councils for many initiatives. And something she's really excited about recently is that she's a co-founder on the project Clan Mothers Healing Village and Knowledge Center. It's a contemporary, sustainable, innovative, and holistic model of healing, education, and training that will support Indigenous women and girls who have been victims of sexual exploitation and sex trafficking. So that's exciting, and I hope she's going to share more about that this morning. Ahmed is the Director of Immigration Partnership Winnipeg. He has previously served as the Executive Director of the Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization of Manitoba, or IRCOM, and has extensive experience working with immigrants and refugee communities in Winnipeg's inner city, and is a passionate advocate for immigrants and refugees in Canada. He's received numerous awards for his work, creating life-changing opportunities for new Canadians. He was a CBC Manitoba Future 40 finalist in 2014 and is a recipient of the Order of the Buffalo Hunt, one of Manitoba's highest honors for his work advocating for refugees and building bridges with Canadian communities. And last but not least, we have Uzoma Asagwara. She's an entrepreneur, public speaker, psychiatric nurse, activist, and former member of the Canadian Women's National Basketball Team. Hope we talk more about that. They sat on she sat on the Premier's Advisory Council of Education, Poverty, and Citizenship, and is the creator of CUPOC Winnipeg, an initiative that creates safer spaces for and positive visibility and representation of queer and trans, Black, Indigenous people of color. Uzoma currently sits on the University of Manitoba's Rady Faculty of Health Sciences Social Accountability Committee, the Board of Directors of the Plug-In Institute of Contemporary Art, and the Board of Directors of the Women's Health Clinic. All right, so as I mentioned, first we'd just like to begin with a reflection of the theme, which we've heard a little bit about this morning. So we'd like to know where does that sit with you?
I thought Uzoma was going to start before me, but you know, we agreed over there. Now she's hedging. I'm fine. So maybe if I can just reflect on this, is that it's a very interesting time that we're in society today. There's lots of things going on. And it seems like there is going to be a crack on the earth that we're sitting, because things that we're seeing are things that we never expected to see at this time and at this day. We're seeing that, you know, things that we never thought will happen. You know, as a society, we've been through very worse situations. We've been through colonialism. We've been through chattel slavery, where 12 million people were hounded in ships across the Atlantic to be sold as property. You know, we've been through imperialism, where people's properties were taken with no regard at all. And we have been through the massacres of people just for profit, all over the world. But we have gone through a lot of change. We've seen the change, for example, the fall of apartheid in South Africa. We've seen the end of colonialism, the end of the Cold War, the enactment of international human rights instruments, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, environmental protection, global movements for change, and the global women's movement, and a society that moved towards the right direction. You know? All this while it's happening, there are things that were happening within our society. How long do you need to take on this one? A couple of minutes? Okay. So all while this is going on, there are still things that were going on, but things that we took for granted. You know, for example, until a couple of years ago, racism towards people of color, like black people, was a normal thing, like, you know, and people used to be hanged and people used to be sold and all these kind of things. We reached a point where we frowned upon these kind of things. We frowned upon when someone does these kind of things, and it became a normal that, you know, we are a progressive society. But all of a sudden, what we're seeing is things that we thought that were gone away are becoming a normal part of life today, that a pure populist, racist politician can actually rise to the top, and all of a sudden, you know, the majority of society supports them, they're in power. That someone who has boasted about sexually assaulting women actually rises to power, and life seems like normal. So these are things that we're seeing, and it looks like, oh my God, what's happening? With the change in within scientific advancement, enactment of human rights principles, society change, mindset of people, and all these kind of things, we can actually be in this situation, and it can be very, very problematic for people, and can, you know, it can create uncertain futures for people.
I hope we're going to bring it to a more positive note throughout the discussion, but I think that helps us set the stage, and we'll maybe move on to Uzoma. Thank you.
Thank you for starting, Abdi. We had agreed that you would start. I don't know why you changed your story up here, but that's fine. So when I think of the edge of change, right now in this moment, a video that I saw a couple of mornings ago comes to mind. This is 2 mornings ago. My partner was like, I really want you to watch this video that I saw yesterday that kind of unnerved me. And I was like, okay, and not very much unnerves her, so I thought I better watch this video. And it was a video of, I guess someone described it as a robot doing parkour. And it was a video of a robot jumping up these boxes. And it really freaked me out. Like, I was like, this is the coolest thing ever, as if we're in a time where there's this really cool robot that can actually do this thing, but my mind automatically went to the robots are going to take over. I saw that movie with Will Smith years ago. I know how this movie ends. I don't like it. That to say, there's some really cool things happening now. You know, like, we're kind of on the edge of some really incredible advancements globally in terms of technology, in terms of movements, in terms of activism, politics, all of it. And we're all on some level able to connect to that because of, you know, advancements like social media. We're able to in live time access change and access experiences as if we're right there with folks as it's happening. And that's an incredible and a beautiful and a powerful thing. The other aspect of it is that it's actually very scary in a lot of ways to see what's happening in the world as it's happening. And Abby just touched on some of that. You know, we, as activists and in the work that I do, being a queer and Black person, you know, that informs the way that I see the world and the way that I experience the world. And it means that, you know, what I'm drawn to and what I absorb on a daily basis is oftentimes very specific. The algorithms of my social media are tailored to, you know, the things that I'm looking up and looking at and that I seek out all the time. And a lot of that content is queer content, and that's content surrounding what it means to be Black and Indigenous and a person of color in 2018. And so a lot of what I'm seeing is actually, yeah, it's very unnerving, it's very scary. You know, a lot of it's incredible and amazing and uplifting, but we are in a time where everybody has access in a lot of ways to everybody, whether that's positive or negative or, you know, somewhere in between, depending on how you feel about things. So it, for me, it's definitely a time where, you know, it feels like there's no off switch. There's really no time to rest. There's no way to sort of tap out of what's going on today. There's just so many aspects of my identity and the communities that I exist within and the communities that I try to work within and folks I try and support where there's no downtime for us, right? Like it's in the news, I stopped watching television years ago for that reason. There's just, you know, for me, it doesn't really feel like I can even watch a show like Grey's Anatomy without deconstructing and dissecting everything that I'm seeing. And, you know, why did Meredith Grey or whatever her name is that still her name? I don't know. Did she change her name on the show? Is that even her character's name? I'm not sure.
Sorry, I don't watch it.
Okay. So it's a really great time. It's a great time to be working in communities and to serving in communities, and you know, it's exciting to see young people, young trans people, young queer people, young two-spirit people doing work and having their voices heard and being visible, being really, really visible. At the same time, I think maybe the reason why this theme has come back around now this was the theme 10 years ago is because we are kind of, and Abby said that, we're kind of on a cusp right now. You know, we're kind of at a tipping point. And I'm really excited and also a little bit nervous to see, you know, what that's going to look like, which way we're going to fall.
Thanks so much. Alderman Louise? I think so.
Hello, yes, it's on. Technology. I'm the old one up here. And it's I love listening to young people, and at Red River College where I work, I learn more from them about the world of technology because I'm not of that world. So what I've seen in my lifetime is totally just blowing me away. I've never seen the human race evolve so fast at any other era than I have during my time. And those of you who are out there and who are older, I'm sure you feel the same way. When I lived up in northern Manitoba, and that's where I was born, in my community we had no electricity, no running water, we had none of those things. We had tiny little homes that we lived in, and we had no telephones or anything like that. And at those years, I want to tell you, I never thought that I was poor. I never thought that I was poor because I had everything I needed. I had warm clothing, shelter. I had people who cared and loved me, and I had all kinds of food to eat. And we never missed, you know, the telephones or the running water because that was our way of life. Now, from that time to where I am now, you know, I came to Winnipeg and I saw TV for the first time, And there was a little community not far from where I lived. It was called Sheridan. Those of you who are older and remember that. But that was a mining town, and it was about 5 miles from our community. And so that was the first time I saw movies. So we would walk all those 5 miles because they had a movie house, they had a community house, they had running water, they had telephones, and they had all this amazing stuff that I never saw before. So we'd walk to go to the movie house, and that's when my world and my thinking began to change. I thought, oh my God, this is a fantasy world I'm looking at on this big screen in front of me. And all these people look so fancy, and their homes are amazing. These castles they lived in, and smoking long cigarettes, and dressed in fine clothing I'd never seen in my life before. I was totally blown away, and I thought, is that a real world, or is it just a fantasy world? That was a big difference from the world I knew and lived in, and how this is actually happening someplace in the universe. We lived in small worlds then. We never worried about anything because we always had food, we always had clothing, and we had all of those things, and we played outside a lot, so we had great creative imaginations. Because we didn't have all the things that children have today to sit with computers, where the mind is not working anymore. The evolution of the human race, to me, is frightening. I'm really afraid. I'm really worried about what's going to happen 10, 15 years from now. Like this young woman said, you know, we're evolving too fast. And that worries me because we are evolving. And when we are doing that, our elders said many years ago, there will come a time when the human race will live in a world of separation. Now, we have been living that world for a long time already, but we don't realize it. You have to remember, each one of us only know what we know. And what we know is our experience is from childhood till where you're sitting today, and what you have learned during that time. In my world, it's changed rapidly. And I've seen it. And an example would be right now, you know, in the colleges and universities, and I sit there, and I'm learning from the youth because they're sitting there and they're all on their phones, okay? And that's how they communicate. And when laughter comes, and my office is right there, and I'm watching out the door, and I hear them laughing, and I said, oh, they're communicating. But what they're communicating is something funny they saw on their iPhone. It's not because they're communicating to each other. And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know about this world. I want you to know that my education level going up north was grade 8. That's how our school went to grade 8. So that's the academic education I have. But what I've learned since I've been in the education system, that there's a different kind of education that they don't have. So what is that? It's an education of the true spirit of who you are as a human being. That's what's missing. You have to remember what I'm seeing, and maybe I'm wrong. What I see is the education system is educating the mind. It's all mind, it's all academic. And we have forgotten. It's that prophecy that our elders said, we will live in a world of separation. And how long we will live in that world depends on the human race. And what has to happen? We have to wake up. And this is what this is all about, to wake up. So what are we going to wake? What are we going to wake up inside of us? Your spirit. Your spirit, because in our culture, in our traditional ways, we know that we are made up of mind, body, spirit, and emotions. So the education system is working only on the mind. So what about the spirit? Do you pay attention to your spirit? When our elders said we will live in a world of separation, that's what they're talking about. They said, we are now in a world where we are truly separated from the true spirit of who we are. There are 3 parts of us that we should be educating, 4 parts. That's the mind, the body, the spirit, and the emotions. And in those years when we had none of this technology, if you can imagine, our people lived mainly through spirit, because our elders told us that you will develop your spirit. You will know the difference between the mind and the spirit. You will know that the mind many times can be the trickster, coyote medicine we call it, where it takes you to many areas that you shouldn't go. But your spirit is going to tell you, no, I can't do that. I can't go out with my friends tonight and have a party because tomorrow I got to go to school and I have to work on developing my mind so that I can work and make a living. So the whole concept is balance and harmony. So part of the education system, I think we're moving in that direction now, but it's a very slow movement. Because many people, when you talk about that, it just goes over their head. And they don't understand it, because you don't understand it if you don't live it. You don't understand it if you don't believe in it. But the separation of the human race, because you see, no matter who we are, what color our skin is, where we live, or what our belief systems are, we are, all of us, children of the earth, each and every one of us. And the earth was created to provide everything that we need. And that's what's happening now. There's nothing that you have that does not come from the Earth Mother. So part of the healing process and the balance is us to come to that place where we have to be grateful. You cannot just take and take and take. We're concerned about environment now. Yes, we had better be concerned about environment. And each one of us has a responsibility to make change. And we can do that in many, many ways when we begin to connect to the true spirit of who we are. It's not about religion. Spirit is real. It's a living force that we should be living, each one of us, every day. And there are many ways that we can do that. And when we begin to do that, there will be changes, and that's how real change comes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Alderman. I think it's important, from what you all said, to be mindful and slow down sometimes and really dig into ourselves and think critically about these things that we're experiencing. So we have a few questions, and our time is short. So I feel that for these questions, maybe we'll try to keep to a little bit, maybe a minute or so, if that's possible. So the first question is just pointing out that you're all involved in different communities and areas of work. And I guess, do you feel this sense of uncertainty and these challenges in your area of work? And what's unique about this moment in time when you think about that?
I said earlier that it's a crazy time that we're in with all the things that are showing up all of a sudden at our doorstep. We've been through cycles of extreme situations where we have seen disrespect for human nature and our environment and the people that we live with. And we have also seen some changes. Throughout the time, we've seen things that have gone, for example, in this country, we have seen the end of colonialism, we have seen the end of residential school system, the apology from the government, protection of refugees, signing of climate treaties. We still have to we still have to bring ourselves to agreeing with the UNRIP, the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. All these things, we're still waiting for it. But we think as a society that we are going in the right direction because there are a lot of things that are happening for us. Some of these things, we're every day taking part in it. But while we do all these kind of things, there's still a lot of issues in our community that we take for granted that are actually affecting people's lives, that can be compared to what we've left in the past. For example, the child welfare system, the prison industrial complex. I went to Headingley the other day, and 65 men came out of a room, and all of them were indigenous. Like, it's all of them under the age of 40 years, and it's very, very disheartening to see this kind of things. So those kind of things that we don't talk about, the kind of a situation that we're going through right now, the racist tendencies, the rise of the right wing, the rise of the populist politicians, crazy times where all these things are happening, where we're erecting, physical and legislative barriers to refugees who have destroyed the environment and invested in conflicts in their own countries that push them out of their daily livelihoods. These things that you see, the detention of children, wake us up to the moment of the situation. One, in that it wakes up to these kind of things that we have a role to change society, number one, on what's happening right now, and it also wakes us up to things that we have taken for granted, the prison industrial complex, the CFS system, all the things that we have been thinking that are not happening in our society. So every time that we do these kind of things, it wakes us up to change things, and it bears some responsibility on us.
What was the question again? I was like, okay. So when I was growing up, I grew up just outside of Winnipeg in St. Norbert, and basically my entire life, I never saw anyone like myself anywhere. I never saw a queer black person anywhere, not in magazines, not in books, not on television. I didn't hear them on the radio. I'm Nigerian. I was raised in a fairly traditional Nigerian household. I grew up in a predominantly white community. I did not believe, it's not that I didn't believe it, I didn't know you could be queer or gay or trans and black or Nigerian. Had no idea. And because of that, it took me a very long time and I really love that you talk about spirituality and connecting with who you really are and your spiritual self. It took me a very long time to accept myself, to understand myself, and to do the work to learn myself. And what I'm seeing now are folks who are able to express themselves and exist and be visible in a way that I was not when I was younger. And that to me is incredible, and it's an essential aspect of being able to be authentically yourself and to exist and contribute to the world in a way that is productive and positive and meaningful. And, so what I'm seeing now are people who are taking it upon themselves to speak their truth, to be visible with what their truth is, and in doing so, they are giving permission to other people to do the same. And that is something that, fortunately now there are people who are older than myself, who I've connected with, who are patient with me, who are mentors in my life, who I learn from, and recognizing that whenever I'm in a room with anybody, it's important for me to lead with what my truth is, with what my identities are, what my intersectionalities, are in this world, so that other people recognize that these are real things. It's really, really cool to see kids in junior high and high school and grade school and smaller than that identifying as queer and as trans and as two-spirit and being visible and being vocal. And a lot of it is happening because there are people in the world who are literally putting their lives on the line, being visible in doing that work. And being visible and being open about who you are and what you're passionate about and what your experiences are is a level of vulnerability, and it's work. It's actual work. So, talking about the things that are important to you and just being able to sit up here and say that I'm a queer black person, that I'm most people in the room, you know, you can see that I'm black. If you don't, I'm announcing it because I don't know if anybody, you know, really visual impairments, et cetera, I don't know. But I do that because it's important for folks to be able to recognize that, you know, it's very, very real for a lot of folks, whether it's refugees, whether it's people locally, whether it's people rurally, who don't have that privilege and ability to be able to live that truth in a way that doesn't put them at risk. And now more than ever, people are able to do that, but it doesn't mean that people are still not at risk in doing that. And so, you know, I think there's never a bad time to be open and be visible and be vocal and to, you know, create space for people to be able to live their truth and be authentic and from a place of being spiritual and, you know, one with who you are.
Almost sounds like there's lots of promise in that uncertainty.
Yeah, there is. Yeah. I think we're talking about just listening to those two, and I do have a hearing problem, so sometimes I don't hear too well, and I forgot my hearing aids today, which doesn't help. So I hear your voices, and what I'd like to say is that I'm a very proud mother of two-spirited people. In our culture, we call them two-spirit. And there's a teaching behind that. If we go back far enough in the history of our people before contact, if there was a child born in a community that was different, seemed to be different than other children, we saw that as an amazing gift from Creator. And the child was really raised to a very high height and said, we have this child that has been gifted to us, and this child has come to us because it will be a teacher to us. And so we will learn much from this person and from this gift. And so that child was treated by the elders, and they would watch it very carefully and say, oh my goodness, it has this gift of having the spirit of two people, male and female. And they were usually the healers in the community. They were usually the healers in the community because they would understand that the difference between male and female and give the gifts of both worlds to male and female. They had that inside of their spirit. That's how we saw it. Or if a child was born with some disfigurement of some kind, they say, this child has come to us again to teach us. So what does it teach us? It teaches us to accept differences, you see. And so that child would teach us to be patient. Maybe it needed more care than another child. And it would teach us to be honest, and we'd all help the family if it had a child that was different in any way. And it would teach us patience and kindness and acceptance and understanding and all those things that we need to learn as humans. And what happened to us? You know, something happened that changed the way we think and see each other. And where did that come from if it didn't belong to us in the first place? It came from someplace. I can remember where it came from in my life. I can only speak of myself. And it came from some of the religions that took over our lives and taught us to think differently. Because you see, you're savages, you're uneducated, and you don't know about anything. We have to educate you, and we have to make you think like us. And they did a good job. So here we are in a world where we're trying to reclaim the truth of Indigenous ways of being, because they were beautiful. They were beautiful. And now we're living in a world, and I see these changes where something else is happening that makes me very excited. And I was at the blueprint, the signing the blueprints of all the education systems in Winnipeg. And what that was about was to bring the truth about Indigenous knowing and values into the education system. Isn't that wonderful? And that's where our way was simple. It wasn't complicated. It was seeing and believing and working together is what we're looking at now. There was nobody who would have more or less. We were all treated equally when it come to food and working together. And we have to come back to that, and this is what this is all about. We have to come back to that because when I said earlier about living in a world of separation, that's what it is. But the greatest separation of all the separations in the world, because we see families separating like we've never seen before. We see communities separating when people have to leave their countries to come to here and other places. That's a separation from their own land. We see organizations separating. It's just separation, separation, separation. And as long as we continue to do that, we can not move ahead, and like our elders would say, in a good way. But the greatest separation of all is the separation for the human spirit. And that's what we have to embrace, because when we do that, something magical will happen. When we begin to understand and to build our spirit rather than our minds. Give yourselves time to sit and say, how do I do that? There are many ways you can do that. And that's what we bring. I think we as Indigenous people can bring that back. And that's what we're trying to do now. And that's what we must do. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to combine a couple of questions here. One is, what can people or organizations or movements do to work better towards change? And what movements, leaders, or initiatives make you most hopeful? So those are kind of, I think, those hopeful examples are showing us those examples of what we can do.
I think that organizations, now more than ever, especially in our province, and under a government that we're seeing a lot of resources being cut. We're seeing a lot of resources being stretched and or disappearing. You can probably talk to Blair about that. Maybe you can give a message to your pal Brian about what's going on. But, we're in a time where organizations and communities really need to work together, really need to share resources, really need to network. You need to put yourselves out there and build relationships in new ways, in creative ways, and in ways that, can champion and progress fundamentally what our goals are. And it's really going to take, because when I think about, what needs to happen for the changes that we need to see to really take place, the folks who have really needed change to take place have been doing this work forever. They have been doing this work from time. I get very annoyed when people try to talk to me, people with tons of privilege try to talk to me about, if black people maybe tried this approach, or if, LGBTQ people tried that approach, or if Indigenous people, didn't march, if I don't know no more and people didn't march down the streets and block traffic. And I get so annoyed with that. Like, it's so ridiculous. Marginalized and oppressed people have been doing this work and thriving as a result and surviving as a result from time, forever, and will continue to. The folks who have more privilege, whether it's organizations, individuals, companies, whatever it is, and who have values and who are progressive and who believe and understand in what really needs to happen, need to start, really getting behind the folks who've been doing this work forever. And, outside of doing the things like listening and really hearing folks and all of that, but providing resources for organizations and demographics that really need it. We know what we need to see happen in order to get where we need to get going. But it's folks who have more privilege, who have more access, more power, who need to do a better job of listening and supporting and lifting up folks who really now more than ever need it. And collectively, organizations, if we can start working together in a way that really, I think utilizes what resources we have now in a more productive way, that would be amazing. And I see that happening. I see that happening with grassroots organizations. I see it with larger organizations that have a lot of dollars and a lot of networks who are reaching out to different folks and reaching out to different groups and saying, like, how can we help you? How can we work together to see X, Y, and Z things take place? So I think if we can amplify that, and that's why I love this gathering, like seeing everybody come together and knowing you're going to be spending the day talking, communicating, sharing cards, sharing stories, you know, sharing coffee, like all of that contributes to ultimately trying to get to where we need to be.
Excellent point.
And vote.
Yeah. Yeah, and vote actually. You know, the changes that have happened for us as society resulted because of people rising up and getting together in solidarity. Solidarity is very important. Like Uzoma said, there are some people who have been doing these things and continue to be invested in it. We cannot be complacent, and we cannot leave it for a few people to continue to do it. We need to rise together, get together, and take it as a sense of responsibility for ourselves to do what is right. If, people are saying that refugees should not come to this country or should not get the support that they need, God forbid, what if it happens to us in the future? What are we going to do about it? So now is the time that we need to wake up to these kind of things. We cannot continue to have young children being taken away from their parents and being put in horrible situations in a circle for the rest of their lives. Like 90% of the kids are in scare, indigenous kids, like the prison industry, all these things that we think that are just going on. I think we need to take responsibility. And it starts with one person. The change needs to happen from us. Like it needs to happen in our table, dinner table, breakfast table, with your neighbors in the afternoon, sit together. I think this is very important that everybody takes a responsibility. I was watching a documentary about the March on Selma the other day, and I watched a white woman who had 4 children who lived in Chicago. This woman left her 4 children and went to help the marchers. And she was rescuing people who were injured. And someone saw this white woman who was carrying the black people, and she had a black man in the car, and they were driving people, and shot her, both of them. The black guy didn't die, the woman died. And her children now are grown and saying that they could be more prouder of their mom than they are, especially today on what she did. Like that is taking responsibility. So each one of us needs to take this responsibility to change. We cannot leave it for a few people. We need to wake up. The problem that we have as a society is that we wake up when the problem has come closer home. Let us not wait for the problem to come closer home. Let us be preventative. Read the news, by the way, because this is important. You need to hear what's going on. We need not be going on with life and saying, I don't care about what's going on. I'm good. Things are good. Things are not good, by the way. A flood is coming right now, but we need to have our own dikes to prevent this flood. That's one. The second thing is, in terms of who in our own societies we have exemplary leadership. For example, the Meet Me at the Bell Tower group, doing it every Friday for the last number of years. The Bear Clan, all these young groups, Make Poverty History, these people who have been doing consistently. I think we need to give energy and power to these people by the numbers. If we have numbers, we're stronger, I think.
Thank you. It reminds me of a quote: there won't be any real change in the world until those who are unaffected by the issues are as angry as those who are. So I think that's kind of what you're saying.
So how we create change, is that what we're kind of on?
If you can give some advice on what people can do to make change together, and maybe drawing attention to some people that are doing it well, or some movements that are doing it well.
That's a very powerful question for sure, and we know that change has to be made. And those of you who are sitting here, of course, you know and you're very familiar with the difficulties that Indigenous people are having here on this beautiful land that we all live on together now, and we're still struggling because our people, you see, have been put in a situation where they have created a dependency. And we think about the reserves, for instance. Today some of our elders called them war camps because they took the land and put all our people on these little pieces of land and said, you stay there and we'll give you money and we'll build homes for you and you won't have to do anything anymore. So what happens to a people when you take all hope away from them and they wait for the check every month? Something happens to them. You see, their spirit dies. And I keep going back to spirit because that's the truth of it all. The men gave up hope because they can't make a living anymore for their people, because they were the warriors, they were the protectors, and they were the providers of women and children. In those days, there was no such a thing as abuse to women because it wasn't allowed. Because we lived in what we called matriarchal systems, where the grandmothers were the leaders in the community. The feminine energy was much stronger in the way of keeping family together. And so that was all taken away from us and it was removed. And our men were told that they should be the leaders. They should be the ones that make all the decisions. And the role and the power of the women was taken away. And so here we are in a movement, and you can see what is happening all over the world by just listening to the news. And I get very excited. And we were talking about that earlier, and the women are standing up and they say, no more. Me too. So remember that everything is connected and everything evolves in the manner in which the human race is living today. So what happened to women all over the world? And what happened to the men rose, and we are no longer walked side by side. Patriarch is up here and matriarch is down here, and now it's changing, and we see it. And sometimes it's hard for the human race to understand those things, but because that's my life and I believe in that, I see it, and I'm understanding what's happening. Women are standing up and they must. It's crucial that we begin to raise our voices, because you see, you are the important ones in the family. There's not one you in here that didn't come from a woman's body. All of us were created by women. And so what happened? What happened? And so the men begin to see things differently and decide that maybe they have to have more control over women. And many of us gave our power away. And now we have missing and murdered women and an abuse of women. And that's happening. You know why? Because we're doing the same thing to our mother, the earth. We keep raping the earth. We keep polluting her water. We keep killing the trees, and the animals are dying because of the greed of humanity. And until that stops and we begin to give something back. You see, there's a word called reciprocity, and our people did that all the time, and that's what's missing. Because we give nothing back. We just take and we take and we take. The earth is our mother, she's feminine. The moon is our grandmother, that controls the women, the blood of women. A lot of people don't know that. All that has been medically proven. And it all ties together as to what we see as happening in the world today. It's all connected. Everything that we are is connected to everything on this earth. And when we continue to do that, we will continue to suffer. So it has to stop, and it stops when women stand up and say, no more. I just came back from Nova Scotia actually last week, and I was invited to the Coady Institutes. It's a university, and there are a lot of international students that come from all over the world that come to that university. And most of them are women. And what they're doing is creating programs. The one that I go to is called Indigenous Women in Leadership Roles. So I go there to bring traditional teachings to the women. And these are women who are educated already. A lot of them are working in the communities. They're social workers and teachers and everything. But we are teaching them to be leaders because we know that nothing will change in our communities till the women take back their rightful places in our community. The power of the feminine. And the men have to accept that and walk with them and encourage them. Because we don't see good things happening in our communities. All of you watch the news every day. You see our chiefs that are there, and they speak very loud and very strong. And I hear them saying, oh yes, my grandmother raised me, we have to listen to the grandmothers again. But you see, it's the mind again, and we just talk the talk. But we don't walk the walk, and we're not doing what we should be doing. And that's our dilemma. We have to learn to change that around and encourage women and say, no, you know what's best for communities. The men can provide. The men can provide, and they can be those warriors to protect women. We're seeing more women being missing and murdered. Why is that happening? Everything that happens is a teaching to us humans that we have to change. The men. I sat on a task force, I just have to say this, for a year and a half, the Canadian Women's Foundation of Canada, and it was about trying to understand what is happening to our children, missing and murdered children and women. That's what it was all about. And what we discovered, I was surprised that there are more Indigenous children being taken. We don't know about those than any other children. We know there's still children that are being taken and raped by men. So we need our men to stand up like the Bear Clan. Yesterday at Red River College, we had something called the Moose Movement. It was started in Alberta. And what it is are men wearing these little patches of moose hide, and their role is to be those warriors, you see. Men mobilizing men to say, stop, stop, stop. And women saying, no more, no more, no more. So that's this big movement of change that we must respect and honor.
Thank you so much. So we're just going to wrap up. Sarah's about to lead us through a reflection process. But before we do that, all these people are going to move forward in the day and go to their workshops. If you want one word to be rolling around in their mind for the rest of the day, and this is a challenge, I realize it's hard to choose one word sometimes, but if you could choose one word that you want them to really hold in focus for the rest of today, based on this theme, what would that be?
Can I backtrack for 1 second? I'm so sorry. I just want to acknowledge Red Rising Magazine, AO, it's Aboriginal Youth Opportunities, Black Space Winnipeg, #MeToo, #Say Her Name, #Say His Name, Black Lives Matter. I don't know more, thank you. That's it. Okay, sorry.
And now one word.
Solidarity.
Well, I know we have to be bolder. We must be bolder. And I know a lot of times you're hearing things that we don't want to hear. But we must. Because if we don't, every time I speak, this happens. It's got to be a reason for that. I'm trying to figure it out.
I didn't plan that.
There must, but you know, where sometimes we want to close our ears and we want to just talk about the important stuff, you know. And we know that the wealth, the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. Those things should never be happening, and it shouldn't happen. Why would one family, have billions and billions of dollars? Does that make sense to any of you? No, it doesn't. It's ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. And they continue to let that happen. and seem to have no power to change that. If I had that kind of money, I'd be sharing it with every one of you. That's what I would do. Because why do I need that much money in the first place? It makes no sense. So it's that kind of stuff that continues to go on. And I think we, the people, because there's always more of us than there are of them, we find our voices and, like we said, and start speaking out, and we can be rebellious in a good way and say no more. We have to find our voices and use your spirit to change the world, because we have that kind of power. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vote.
Thank you so much. All right, Sarah's coming up again. Can we one more hand for all of our panelists? Thank you so much for sharing your insights. Big round of applause, everybody.